Okay, the next chapter is lesson 27. And here is the good news about lesson 27, is looking at everything that we need to know about Greek. You have learned everything you need to know about nouns. You know that nouns come in masculine, feminine, neuter, gender. You know that they have 4 different cases: nominative, genitive, dative, accusative. You've learned about participles and the different functions of them. You've learned about infinitives. And you've learned everything about verbs in terms of tense, voice, and mood. You know what the present, future, imperfect, aorist, perfect, pluperfect. You know what the active, middle, passive, and you know what the indicative, imperative, and subjunctive are. The only thing you haven't learned is the optative, which will be in the last chapter of Croy, because the optative doesn't show up much in the New Testament. So, there you have it. You are now officially, you know all of the base things for Greek. And so the remaining chapters are mainly just tying up loose ends and going through some irregular verb forms and stuff. So 27 is going to talk about pronouns, indefinite, relative pronouns. 27 starts 3 chapters on me verbs. So these are just verbs with different endings, a few different endings. And then 31 is on adjectives, comparative adjectives. And then 32 will cover the optative with a few other things. So we are for sure coming in. We are hopefully almost landing here soon. So the things we're learning, they are, you need to learn them, but they are kind of secondary to understanding the language. So you shouldn't be learning as much new information. It'll be more just learning new forms. So the interrogative pronoun, if you have been reading the Young's reader along with Croy here, you will have seen the interrogative pronoun a lot in terms of in questions. And the indefinite pronoun, which is the same form just without the accent, also shows up in Young's reader as well. So these shouldn't be too new. There's no new endings or forms. These are just third declension endings. Tis T just means who or what. So what is the woman saying? And it introduces a question. Where, or if it's not introducing a question, it is used as the indefinite pronoun, meaning, so like looking at our example here, if someone speaks. So rather than a definite pronoun, like if he speaks, right, that would be a definite pronoun, talking about a definite thing. We know who we're thinking about. If he speaks. Where here we're talking about indefinite. We don't know if someone speaks. Or sometimes you'll see the indefinite pronoun used with another noun, like anthropos tis erchetai, like a certain man, some man is going. Yeah, so that's the indefinite pronoun. It's the same forms as the interrogative pronoun, just with a different accent. The relative pronoun is translated as who or that, and it modifies a noun. So looking at the examples here, we have the man who came from the city. Oops. So I'm going to highlight this. The man who came from the city preached the word. Notice that we could just take out this whole phrase. And we could just say, the man preached the word. Okay, this whole phrase is just modifying, it's giving you more information about the man, but it's not part of the main phrase. It's modifying a noun in the sentence. So here you can see hos is modifying aner, and it's nominative masculine singular. Okay, it's masculine singular, because it's referring to the man, which is also masculine singular. It's nominative because it's the subject of Elthan. So the man who, or we could insert the man again, the man came from the city. It's the subject of Elthan, so it's in the nominative. Okay, that's different from the second example here. So the woman whom we saw wanted to buy the book. So here's our relative, and it's modifying woman. The woman wanted to buy the book, so you can read right over it, but it's giving us extra information about the woman, and it is feminine singular because woman is feminine singular. But notice here, woman is in the nominative. Woman is nominative because it's the subject of thele. The woman wants. Whereas hein is accusative because it's the direct object of we saw. So it's we that's the subject of seen. We saw her, or whom, the woman whom we saw, or we saw her, the woman who wants to buy the book. So that's why it's accusative. So it's accusative. The case is determined by how it's used in its clause, where the number and gender is determined by what it's modifying. Okay, let's go down here to a neuter here. So already we have heard these things that y'all speak. So here's the relative clause. Already we have heard these things. Period. Like we could make that into its own sentence. But then the relative clause is telling us more information about tauta, that y'all speak. Here is ha could be either nominative or accusative in terms of its form, but we know it's accusative because the subject is y'all. Y'all speak, and then these things would be how the relative pronoun is functioning there. So hopefully that makes sense. We do the same thing in English with our pronouns. Not with our relative pronouns, we just have who and that to translate. And so you don't see it in our relative pronouns, but you do see it in our normal pronouns. So if I say, the man, let's just go to this example. The man, try to get that away. Okay. The man preached the word. He came from the town. So there I have to use he, and I use he because I'm modifying man, which is masculine singular, and so I use he, which is masculine singular, to modify man. And then I also use he because it's the subject of came. Okay? In English, I can't say, the man preached the word, him came from the city. Right? That just sounds weird to us. It doesn't work, right? Because him is the accusative form of the pronoun. But we can't use the accusative when it's the subject of the noun or the verb in its sentence. So yeah. So we have to use the case in terms of its clause. So we don't say him came from the city, we say he. We use the case that fits its clause. And then we use the same gender and number of what it's modifying. So I wouldn't say she came from the city, or I wouldn't say they came from the city, because that's the wrong number or gender when modifying the man. Okay, so that is the relative pronoun. So now we can kind of stick these together. So I'm going to skip down to 195, which talks about indefinite relative pronouns. And it is just the relative pronoun, hos, he, ho, with the indefinite pronoun, tis, tis, ti. And if you just slap them together, you translate it as whoever or whatever, right? Rather than having a definite relative pronoun, the man who did that. Here, we're making it indefinite. Whoever does this. So you'll see the examples here. Whoever wishes to follow me. Whoever does the will of God. You can see the hostis. So that's the indefinite relative pronoun. Then I'm going to go back up to 194 here, which is conditional relative clauses. So another way to do a indefinite relative pronoun type of translation, like whoever, is to put the relative pronoun with an aeon. Who, if ever. But you can translate it as whoever. So whoever speaks against the Spirit. And then you can do this with different kinds of pronouns. So here you get whatever because of the neuter. Here you get wherever. And then here you get when, plus the on there. Whenever. That's hote plus on. Oh, it shows it here. Hote plus on. Whenever. And then the last thing it briefly talks about here is oida, which is technically the perfect tense of eidon, to see, or hrao, to see. But in Greek, it basically has become its own word. And so even though it's technically in the perfect, just translate it as present. So just translate it as I know, and then you'll see the pluperfect of oida, and you translate that as I knew. So this is just an irregular verb, and it's common. It's very common to talk about I know and I knew. So you'll get used to it as you read, but it will probably trip you up at the beginning here. Okay, and then that brings us to the end of the lesson. So, go to work.